The old man sits motionless in his wheelchair on the veranda of the Casements, his winter estate in Ormond Beach, Florida. It is dawn on May 23rd, 1937. The Atlantic Ocean murmurs beyond the palm trees, each wave a whispered conversation between water and sand, rhythmic and eternal. The air is thick with salt and the sweet decay of tropical flowers, gardenias blooming somewhere in the darkness, their scent almost overpowering in the humidity. He is 97 years old, 6 weeks shy of 98, and he has been the richest man in America for longer than most people can remember. His skin is paper-thin, translucent in the early light, showing the blue tracery of veins beneath. He wears a wig, always a wig now, since his body betrayed him 45 years ago and stripped away every hair from his head, his eyebrows, even his eyelashes. It is a good wig, expensive, carefully maintained, but in this pre-dawn light it sits slightly askew, giving him a vulnerable, almost theatrical appearance. His valet stands nearby, waiting with the practiced patience of a man who has learned to anticipate needs before they are spoken. The old man's lips move. They form words, barely audible, perhaps just a name, perhaps a prayer, perhaps nothing coherent at all. The valet leans closer, but before he can make sense of the sound, consciousness leaves the old man like water draining from a basin, smooth and inevitable. By the time the sun fully rises, painting the sky in shades of coral and gold, John Davison Rockefeller is dead. The newspapers will report it with a strange mixture of reverence and unease. The richest American is gone. The man who once controlled 90% of the oil refined in the United States. The man who gave away more money than anyone in human history. The man whose name became synonymous with both ruthless capitalism and systematic charity. Headlines in cities across the nation announce it in fonts reserved for presidents and wars. Newsreel cameras will capture the funeral, the crowds, the procession of men in black suits carrying the weight of an era on their shoulders. But there is another story beneath these facts, a story that Rockefeller spent his entire life trying to hide, a story that shaped every choice he made, every dollar he earned, every enemy he crushed, every institution he built. It is the story of a wound that never healed, a shame that never lifted, a father whose ghost he could never escape. It is a story about the price of respectability when you are born without it, about the lengths a man will go to rewrite his own origins, about the impossible task of building a monument so tall that it casts a shadow long enough to hide what came before. Before we follow that story to its source, take a moment to like this video and subscribe to the channel. Your support genuinely means everything to me, and I am curious, where in the world are you watching from today? Drop a comment and let me know. Now let us go back to the beginning, to a farm in upstate New York, where a boy was learning that the world was not what it appeared to be. The year is 1839. The place is Richford, New York, a small farming community in the burned-over district, so called because it has been scorched again and again by waves of evangelical revival, by preachers promising salvation and damnation in equal measure. The land itself seems to echo with religious fervor. Every town has its chapel, every crossroads its circuit preacher, every barn its meeting for some new sect, promising the true path to heaven. This is the soil from which Mormonism will sprout, where the Millerites will wait for the end of the world, where the Second Great Awakening burns with its brightest and most feverish light. Into this atmosphere of fervent belief and apocalyptic expectation, John Davison Rockefeller is born on July 8th, the second of 6 children. The farmhouse where he enters the world is modest, 2 stories of weathered clapboard, drafty in winter and stifling in summer. His first cries mingle with the sound of his mother's exhausted breathing and his father's hearty laughter from somewhere downstairs, probably regaling a visitor with another exaggerated tale. His mother, Eliza Davison Rockefeller, is the daughter of a prosperous farmer. She is devout, disciplined, and grimly practical. Her hands are always busy, churning butter, mending clothes, tending the kitchen garden that keeps the family fed when money is scarce. Her favorite saying is, "Willful waste makes woeful want," and she lives by it with religious intensity, saving every scrap of fabric, every bit of food, every penny that passes through her fingers. She teaches her children to work from the moment they can walk, to save a portion of everything they earn, to give a tithe to the church, no matter how little they have. When she prays, and she prays often, kneeling beside her bed each night, her voice a low murmur of supplication, her words are not flowery or sentimental. She asks for strength, for provision, for the ability to endure whatever trials God sees fit to send. She is the moral center of the household, the one who holds things together when everything threatens to fall apart, the one who ensures that the children are clean and fed and taught their catechism even when their father has been gone for months and the creditors are knocking at the door. Young John watches her with the intensity of a child trying to understand the rules of a game he must play perfectly. He sees how she never complains, never raises her voice at his father's absences, never admits to the neighbors that anything is wrong. He learns from her that dignity is something you maintain through discipline, that respectability is a performance that must be perfected, that survival sometimes means pretending that everything is fine when it is not. His father is something else entirely. William Avery Rockefeller, known to everyone as Bill, or to some as Devil Bill, is a man of considerable charm and equally considerable dishonesty. He is tall, over 6 feet, with a booming voice and an easy smile that shows too many teeth. He has thick, dark hair and a full beard, both of which he oils and combs with the vanity of a much younger man. When he walks into a room, he commands attention, his presence expansive and overwhelming. He has a way of looking at people that makes them feel like they are the only person in the world, at least for the moment his attention is upon them. He claims to be a botanic physician, traveling the countryside in a wagon loaded with bottles and tins, selling cure-all elixirs that cure nothing at all. He claims his medicines can treat cancer, blindness, deafness, and a dozen other afflictions. He is a showman, a storyteller, a confidence man in the truest sense. He inspires confidence that he does not deserve. He is gone for months at a time, then returns flush with cash, spending freely, entertaining the children with magic tricks and stories of his adventures on the road. He brings gifts, ribbons for the girls, a penknife for John, sweets that the family would never otherwise afford. When he is home, the family lives well. The table is full, the creditors are paid. His mother's face loses some of its tension, but the ease never lasts. Within weeks, sometimes days, Bill is restless again, packing his wagon, making excuses about appointments he must keep, towns where people are waiting for his services. And then he is gone again, and Eliza is left to manage the household on credit, to explain to the shopkeepers that Mr. Rockefeller will settle accounts when he returns, to somehow keep the family fed and clothed and sheltered, while never quite knowing when or if her husband will come back. John is 7 years old the first time he understands that his father is not what he claims to be. He is in town with his mother, standing outside the general store, while she negotiates yet another extension of credit. 2 men are talking nearby, not quite whispering, their voices carrying in the way that voices do when people want to be overheard without taking responsibility for it. "Bill Rockefeller, you mean? Haven't seen him in months. Off selling his snake oil to some other fool town, I expect." Snake oil is right. My cousin bought a bottle of his cancer cure last year. Cost him $2. $2. Said it would shrink the tumor in 6 weeks. Cousin's been dead since March. Bill got his $2 though, I'll wager. John's mother's hand tightens on his shoulder, her fingers digging in hard enough to hurt. She does not look at the men. She completes her business with the shopkeeper and walks home, her spine rigid, her face expressionless. She never mentions what was said, but John has heard, and he understands. His father is a cheat. The medicines are worthless. The people who buy them are not customers, they are victims. And he, John Davison Rockefeller, is the son of a man who takes money from dying people by lying to them. The knowledge sits in his stomach like a stone. He does not speak of it, not even to his older sister Lucy. But it changes something in him. He becomes watchful, careful. He begins to see the pattern, his father's absences, his mother's strained silences, the way people in town look at them with a mixture of pity and contempt. Bill Rockefeller believes in teaching his sons to be sharp.
I cheat my boys every chance I get, he brags to neighbours, his voice full of false joviality. I want to make 'em sharp, can't let 'em grow up soft and stupid. World will eat 'em alive if they don't learn to watch out for themselves. He lends young John money at 10% interest, the same rate he would charge a stranger. When John is 10,
he raises 3 turkeys and sells them for a small profit. Bill takes the money, investing it for his son at the promised interest rate. It takes months for John to see any return, and when he finally does, the amount is less than what was agreed. When John points this out, carefully presenting his calculations, Bill laughs and tells him he should have gotten the terms in writing. See, now you've learned something worth more than the money. Never trust a deal that isn't on paper. So this is how the boy learns that even family is a form of transaction, that trust must be earned and verified, that the world is a place where you must constantly guard against being taken advantage of. He learns that a contract is more reliable than a promise, that numbers on a ledger are more trustworthy than words in the air. He learns that even love, especially love, can be weaponized, used as a tool for manipulation. It is a lesson that will serve him well in the brutal world of business and cost him dearly in every other aspect of his life. But there is something else happening in the Rockefeller household, something the children are too young to fully understand but old enough to sense. There is a woman living with them named Nancy Brown, whom Bill describes as a housekeeper. She is young, younger than Eliza, with dark hair and a way of looking at the floor when Bill is in the room. She is not a housekeeper, she is Bill's mistress, and she bears him 2 illegitimate daughters while living under the same roof as his wife and legitimate children. The girls are raised alongside John and his siblings, and for years the children do not fully understand the relationship, only that Nancy is there, a silent presence, and that their mother's lips thin to a hard line whenever Nancy enters the room. Eliza tolerates this arrangement with the grim endurance of a woman who has no other options. She has 6 children and no income of her own. Divorce in 1840s New York is almost impossible and carries a social stigma that would destroy what little standing the family has. So she focuses on her children, on her Bible, on holding the family together through sheer force of will. She does not speak of Nancy Brown. She does not acknowledge the 2 girls who are clearly Bill's children. She simply endures, her back straight, her prayers longer and more fervent, her grip on her children's moral education tighter with each passing year. John sees this too. He sees his mother's silent suffering. He sees how she never complains, never confronts, never breaks. And he learns another lesson, that sometimes survival means swallowing rage and shame, means maintaining a facade of normalcy in the face of intolerable circumstances, means pretending that the unbearable is actually quite bearable. John is 10 years old when the fragile structure of his childhood collapses entirely. In 1849, a woman comes forward with an accusation. Bill Rockefeller has raped the family's maid, Her name is Anne Vanderbeek. She is 18 years old. She goes to the magistrate and swears out a formal complaint. She says that Bill forced himself on her multiple times, that she was afraid to speak up because he threatened her, that she can no longer stay silent. The details are murky. They will remain murky, because no trial ever takes place, but the accusation is public and the scandal is immediate and devastating. In a small farming community in 1849, rape is not discussed in polite company, but everyone discusses it anyway, in whispers and sidelong glances. The Rockefeller children hear the word on the street, hissed like a curse. Neighbors stop visiting. Invitations cease. At church, people make a point of sitting several pews away, as if moral corruption might be contagious. Rather than face the charge, Bill flees. He simply disappears one night, his wagon and horse gone, no note. Explanation. He leaves his family to deal with the gossip, the shame, the pointed fingers and whispered conversations that follow them everywhere. For weeks, Eliza does not know where he is or if he is coming back. She tells the children their father is away on business, her voice steady, her face revealing nothing. But John sees the way her hands shake when she reads the letter that finally arrives. Bill is unavoidably detained. He will send money when he can. They should not worry. But there is no money. Weeks stretch into months. The family is surviving on credit that is increasingly difficult to obtain. The shopkeepers are sympathetic to Eliza. Everyone knows she is a decent, God-fearing woman, but sympathy does not pay debts. The children's shoes develop holes. Meals become smaller, plainer. John's older sister Lucy takes in sewing to earn a few pennies. John himself begins doing odd jobs for neighbors, calculating in his head how much he needs to earn to buy a sack of flour, a pound of salt, a chicken for Sunday dinner. The family moves to escape it. First to Owego, New York, where Bill reappears briefly, then vanishes again when he hears that the authorities are still interested in the charges from Richford. Then to Strongsville, Ohio, just outside Cleveland, where they hope to start fresh, where no one knows the name Rockefeller or the accusations that follow it like a shadow. But John carries the shame with him, internalized and unspoken. He becomes serious, methodical, rigid. His siblings call him Mr. Serious. And it is not entirely affectionate. He does not play like other children. He does not laugh easily. When he smiles, it is careful, calculated, as if he is unsure whether showing pleasure is safe. Teachers note that he behaves like a little adult, that he likes things orderly, that he has no patience for chaos or unpredictability. He arranges his school books with geometric precision. He completes his assignments with a thoroughness that borders on compulsive. He excels at mental arithmetic, able to solve complex problems in his head, while other students fumble with slate and chalk. Numbers, he is learning, are reliable. Numbers do not lie. Numbers do not abandon you or betray you. 2 plus 2 is always 4, no matter what chaos is happening in the world beyond the ledger. He is training himself to master the world through calculation, to impose order on circumstances that feel perpetually unstable. He is building a wall between himself and the chaos of his father's life, brick by brick, number by number. And then around 1855, when John is 16, he discovers something that turns his relationship with his father stone cold. Bill Rockefeller, still on the run from the rape accusation, has married another woman. Her name is Margaret Allen. She is 25 years his junior. Bill is living under an assumed name, Dr. William Livingston, and has created an entirely separate life in which his first family does not exist. He has not divorced Eliza. He has simply pretended she and their 6 children have ceased to be. He is a bigamist, a crime that could land him in prison if discovered. John learns this through a letter that Bill sends to Eliza, a letter that is shockingly casual in its revelation. Bill needs money, he always needs money, and he mentions in passing his current situation as if marrying another woman while already married is a minor detail, an inconvenient technicality. Eliza reads the letter and then sits very still for a long time. When she finally speaks, her voice is flat, drained of all emotion. "We will not speak of this," she says. "Not to anyone. Do you understand?" John understands. He understands that this secret, if revealed, would destroy what remains of the family's reputation. His mother, who has held them together through poverty and scandal and humiliation, cannot bear this final betrayal becoming public. The rape accusation was bad enough. Bigamy would finish them. They would be pariahs, untouchable, the children of a criminal and madman. So John buries it. He tells no one, not even his siblings at first, though eventually they all come to know, in the way families know terrible truths without speaking them aloud. He supports his father financially when necessary. Bill still comes around occasionally, still demands money, still exerts a kind of tyrannical claim on his children, still acts as if he is the patriarch of the family rather than its destroyer. And John gives him money, his face expressionless, handing over cash that he can barely afford to spare, because what else can he do? This man is his father. This man's crimes, if exposed, will taint them all. But emotionally the relationship is over. John will spend the rest of his life trying to become everything his father is not: respectable, controlled, reliable, honest in his public dealings, even when ruthless in his private ones. He will build a fortune through calculation rather than charm, through systems rather than schemes. He will create an empire that is the opposite of his father's life, permanent instead of transient, legitimate instead of fraudulent, documented in ledgers and contracts instead of maintained through lies and misdirection. This is the wound. This is the original trauma that will shape everything that follows. The son of a conman and a bigamist, living with the constant fear that the truth will come out, that the carefully constructed facade of respectability will crumble and reveal the rot beneath. The boy who learned that the world is unstable, that people cannot be trusted, that security is an illusion that can vanish at any moment. The young man who decides that the only way to survive is to control everything, to leave nothing to chance, to accumulate enough power and money that he will never again be at the mercy of forces beyond his control. In 1855, John drops out of Cleveland Central High School 2 months before graduation. He does not need a diploma. He has already completed a 6-month course at Folsom's Commercial College in 3 months, mastering bookkeeping, penmanship, commercial law, banking and exchange. The other students at Folsom's are older, men in their 20s looking to enter business. John at 16 is the youngest in the class, but he is also the best. He memorizes procedures, he practices penmanship until his letters are perfect, each one identical to the last. He learns double-entry bookkeeping not just as a procedure but as a philosophy. Every transaction has 2 sides. Every debit must have a corresponding credit. The books must always balance. It is a system of accountability, of verification, of truth that can be proven with numbers. It is everything his father's life is not. He is ready to enter the world of business, and he is in a hurry. His family needs money. More than that, he needs to prove that he is not his father, that he can build something solid and permanent and legitimate. He spends 6 weeks looking for work, methodically visiting every business in Cleveland, presenting himself as a serious young man who understands numbers and discipline. He walks from office to office, his suit carefully brushed, his shoes polished, his handshake firm but not aggressive. He has prepared a small portfolio of his best penmanship samples, his bookkeeping exercises from Folsom's. He speaks quietly, respectfully, making eye contact but not staring. He has learned to present himself as trustworthy, competent, sober. He is selling respectability, and he is very good at it. On September 26, 1855, he is hired as an assistant bookkeeper at Hewitt & Tuttle, a commission merchant firm dealing in grain, hay, meats, and miscellaneous goods. His salary is 50 cents a day. He is 16 years old, and it is the most important day of his life. For the rest of his life, John D. Rockefeller will celebrate September 26th as Job Day, marking it with more ceremony than his own birthday. It is the day he became independent, the day he escaped the chaos of his father's world and entered the realm of ledgers and accounts, where everything could be quantified, where honesty could be verified, where a man's worth was determined by the numbers in his books rather than the charm of his smile or the audacity of his lies. In his private journal he will write years later, "All my future seemed to hinge on that day." He is not exaggerating. He throws himself into the work with an intensity that borders on obsession. He arrives early and leaves late. He masters every detail of the commission business, how to grade wheat by sight and feel, how to negotiate shipping rates with the railroad agents, how to spot discrepancies in accounts that might indicate fraud or error. He learns the markets, memorizing the prices of commodities in different cities, understanding the seasonal fluctuations, predicting when to buy and when to sell. He is punctual, sober, meticulous. He never drinks, never smokes, never gambles. While other young men his age are spending their evenings in taverns or courting girls, John is at home, studying account books, practicing calculations, reading the commercial newspapers. On Sundays, he attends the Erie Street Baptist Church, where he teaches Sunday school and sings in the choir. His voice is not particularly good, but he is reliable, always there, always prepared with the lesson. From his very first paycheck, he tithes 10% to the church. The first week, his salary is $3.50. He takes 35 cents and puts it in the collection plate, keeping careful note of it in his personal account book. This is not a gesture. This is a principle that will govern his entire life. Whatever else he becomes, he will be a man who gives systematically, who believes that wealth carries with it a religious obligation to charity. His account book from these early years still exists preserved in archives. It is written in his perfect penmanship, each entry precise, each column balanced. He records not just income and expenses, but also his charitable giving. To Missionary Society 25 cents, to Church Building Fund 50 cents, to Widow Green 10 cents. Even when he is earning only a few dollars a week, he is giving away a portion of it. It is not about the amount, it is about the principle. It is about proving that he is a man of discipline and moral purpose, that he is governed by something higher than mere self-interest. But there is another principle governing his actions, one less noble and more desperate. He is building a wall of respectability, brick by brick, transaction by transaction. Every honest day's work, every tithe, every careful entry in the ledger is a repudiation of Devil Bill, a declaration that the son will not follow the father's path. He is creating a version of himself that is the opposite of his father in every way. Where Bill is chaotic, John is orderly. Where Bill is dishonest, John is scrupulous. Where Bill is unreliable, John is dependable. He is not just building a career, he is building an identity, a self that can replace the shameful origins he can never quite escape. The country around him is changing rapidly. In 1859, Edwin Drake strikes oil in Titusville, Pennsylvania, drilling the first successful oil well and sparking a rush that will transform the American economy. Almost overnight, a new industry is born. Oil refined into kerosene can replace whale oil for lighting. It is cheaper, cleaner, more abundant. Whale oil costs $1.50 per gallon and is becoming scarce as whale populations decline. Kerosene can be produced for a fraction of that cost, and there seems to be no limit to the supply of crude oil pooling beneath the hills of western Pennsylvania. Cleveland, with its railroad connections and access to shipping on Lake Erie, is perfectly positioned to become a refining center. Crude oil can be shipped in from Pennsylvania by rail, refined in Cleveland's industrial district, and sent on to markets across the country and around the world. The Cuyahoga River, winding through the city's Flats district, provides water for cooling and processing. The railroads, multiple competing lines, create opportunities for negotiating favorable rates. Cleveland has everything needed to become the center of the new industry, and entrepreneurs across the city are beginning to realize it. John is 20 years old and still working at Hewitt & Tuttle when the Civil War begins in 1861. The news reaches Cleveland by telegraph, and the city erupts in a frenzy of excitement and fear. Men line up to enlist. Flags appear on every building. Recruiting offices are overwhelmed. There is a sense that the war will be short, glorious, an adventure that will be over by Christmas. John does not enlist. He is the primary support for his mother and younger siblings. His father is gone more often than not, his contributions sporadic and unreliable. If John goes to war, his family will have no income, no security, so he stays. And when the draft is instituted in 1863, he hires substitutes to fight in his place, a legal practice for those who can afford it. He pays $300 for the first substitute, $300 more for the second when the first man is killed. It is a fortune, nearly a year's salary, but he pays it without hesitation. This decision will haunt him later when critics accuse him of profiteering from the war while others died. The accusation is not entirely unfair. The war creates massive demand for commodities, grain, salt, pork, anything that can feed or supply an army. The commission business booms. Hewitt and Tuttle are overwhelmed with orders. John works 16-hour days, managing accounts, negotiating contracts, coordinating shipments. The firm's profits soar, and John's salary increases accordingly. By 1864, he is earning $2,000 a year, a substantial sum for a 25-year-old. But John does not see it as profiteering. He sees an opportunity. The war is creating chaos, shortages, gluts, wild price swings. Fortunes are being made and lost in weeks. But chaos creates opportunity for those who can remain calm and calculating, while others panic. Those who can anticipate needs, secure supplies, manage logistics efficiently, those are the ones who will profit. And why should profit be shameful? The army needs food and supplies. Someone must provide them. That he does so efficiently and makes money in the process does not strike him as immoral. It strikes him as good business. He learns something crucial during these years, that great fortunes are made during times of disruption and crisis. When everything is stable, profits are incremental. Competition is fierce, margins are thin. But when the world is in flux, when war or technological change or financial panic creates uncertainty, that is when the prepared and the disciplined can make extraordinary gains. It is a lesson he will apply again and again throughout his career. In 1859, at age 20, John had partnered with Morris B. Clark to form Clark and Rockefeller, a commission merchant business. To raise his share of the capital, $2,000, John borrows $1,000 from his father at 10% interest. It is a bitter irony that Devil Bill's money, earned through fraud and quackery, provides the seed capital for his son's legitimate business empire. But John does not refuse the loan. He needs the capital, and Bill, for once,
has it to lend. John pays the debt back with interest within 2 years, every penny accounted for, the transaction documented in writing. When the final payment is made, John keeps the receipt, filed carefully with his other important papers. It is proof that he owes his father nothing, that whatever he builds from this point forward is his own. By 1863, Cleveland is in the grip of oil fever.
refineries are springing up throughout the city's industrial district known as the Flats, a warren of refineries, warehouses and rail yards along the Cuyahoga River. The air reeks of sulfur and crude oil, a smell that residents learn to tolerate and eventually ignore. At night, the flats glow with the fires of refineries, the flames reflected in the river, turning the water the color of blood. It is dangerous work. Fires and explosions are common. Men die with regularity, burned or crushed or overcome by fumes, but the profits are enormous for those who succeed. Fortunes are being made and lost overnight. Most refineries are small operations, often undercapitalized, prone to fires and explosions, subject to wild swings in the price of crude. A man can build a refinery for a few $1,000s, make a fortune in 6 months, then lose everything when the price of crude spikes or the refinery burns down. It is a chaotic, dangerous, speculative business, exactly the kind of unstable situation that John's entire childhood has trained him to fear and master. Maurice Clark's brother Sam proposes that they enter the refining business. He has studied the industry. He knows a chemist, Samuel Andrews, who understands the refining process, who can extract more kerosene from a barrel of crude than most refiners can manage. If they partner with Andrews and build a refinery, they can make far more money than they are making in the commission business. John is initially reluctant. Refining is risky, capital-intensive, and subject to volatile market conditions. The commission business is profitable and safe. Why risk it? But he studies the situation carefully. He visits refineries, spending hours watching the process, asking questions, taking notes. He talks to chemists, learning the science of distillation, understanding how crude oil can be separated into its components: kerosene for lighting, lubricating oils for machinery, paraffin for candles, gasoline, which is mostly just a useless byproduct that refiners burn off or dump in the river. He examines the finances, calculating costs and potential profits, stress testing his assumptions against different price scenarios. He concludes that while individual refineries may fail, the industry itself has a future. Kerosene is replacing whale oil across the world. Every home, every business, every street lamp is a potential customer. Demand will only increase as the technology improves and prices fall. The key is not to speculate on the price of crude, which is volatile and unpredictable, but to control costs, maximize efficiency, and survive the inevitable shakeouts that will eliminate weaker competitors. If they can build a refinery that is more efficient than the competition, that produces higher quality kerosene at a lower cost, they can survive and eventually dominate. In 1863, Clark and Rockefeller enter the oil business, partnering with Samuel Andrews to build a refinery in the Flats. They call it Andrews, Clark and Company. John invests $4,000, every penny he has saved, plus borrowed money. It is terrifying and exhilarating. For the first time in his life, he is betting everything on a single venture. He brings to it the same meticulous attention to detail he brought to the commission business. He tracks every expense, no matter how small. He negotiates relentlessly with suppliers, squeezing every penny out of every transaction. He studies the refining process obsessively, learning to judge the quality of crude by sight and smell, understanding how temperature and distillation rates affect the yield and quality of the final product. He reinvests profits into better equipment, more efficient stills, better barrel-making facilities, improved storage tanks. He does not drink or socialize with other refinery men. He does not gamble on price swings or chase quick profits. While other refiners are speculating, trying to time the market, hoping for windfalls, John is focused on fundamentals, efficiency, quality, cost control. He is building something meant to last, something that cannot be destroyed by a single fire or price collapse or bad bet. He is building the opposite of his father's life, solid, systematic, permanent. In 1864, at age 25, John marries Laura Celestia Spellman, known as SETI. He has courted her for 9 years with the same patient, methodical approach he brings to business. They met at church when John was a teenager, newly arrived in Cleveland. SETI was a teacher, the daughter of Harvey Buell Spellman, a prosperous businessman and abolitionist. The Spellman family is exactly what John aspires to join: respectable, educated, active in civic life. Harvey Spellman is the kind of man who is trusted, whose word is taken seriously, whose children grow up with the assumption that they belong in polite society. John courts SETI slowly, properly. He attends church socials. He takes her for walks. He is never inappropriate, never pushy. He writes her letters that are affectionate but restrained, full of observations about his work and his hopes for the future. He is selling her on a vision of himself as a man of principle and ambition, a man who will build something significant, a man who is nothing like his father. SETI sees something in him that others might miss. Where some see a cold and calculating young man, she sees discipline and purpose. Where others see a lack of humor, she sees seriousness and depth. She is devout and serious herself, a teacher who believes in temperance and charity, who reads the Bible daily, who thinks that wealth should be used for good rather than merely enjoyed. She shares his Baptist faith, his belief in systematic charity, his conviction that privilege brings responsibility. Her judgment was always better than mine, John will say later. Without her keen advice, I would be a poor man. He is not being merely sentimental. SETI is intelligent and practical. She understands money. She asks hard questions about his business plans, questions that force him to think more clearly about risks and opportunities. When he is considering the refinery investment, she helps him work through the calculations, playing devil's advocate, identifying potential problems. When he is unsure whether to expand or consolidate, she offers perspectives that he has not considered. The marriage is solid, built on shared values rather than passion. They will have 4 children together: Bessie, Alice, Alta, and John D. Rockefeller Jr., though Alice will die in infancy and Alta will die at 13. The losses will devastate SETI, and John will grieve in his own controlled way, never speaking of it except in the most formal terms. But their son, John Jr., will survive to adulthood and carry on the family name, eventually taking over the vast philanthropic enterprise his father builds. SETI manages the household with the same efficiency John brings to business. She keeps meticulous accounts of every expenditure, no matter how small. She saves string and wrapping paper, reuses envelopes, darns socks until they cannot be darned anymore. Even as the family's wealth grows, she maintains the habits of frugality that she and John were both raised with. She raises the children to be humble despite their growing wealth, to understand that privilege brings responsibility, that money is not for display but for use. She is, in many ways, an idealized version of John's mother, disciplined, moral, steady, but without the burden of a disreputable husband. By 1865, John is convinced that the future of the oil business lies not in producing crude, which is subject to geological chance and market speculation, but in refining and distribution, which can be controlled and systematized. Crude oil production is a gamble. You drill a well and hope you strike oil, but the well might be dry, or it might produce for only a few months before running out. You have no control over the supply or the price. But refining is different. You can build a refinery wherever you want, as long as you can get crude oil shipped to you. You can control the quality of your product through careful management. You can reduce costs through efficiency and scale. You can build relationships with customers and create a reliable market. He buys out the Clark brothers, paying Maurice $40,000 for his share, an enormous sum, and brings in new partners, including a man who will become crucial to his success, Henry M. Flagler. Flagler is everything John is not: sociable, charming, well-connected. He comes from a wealthy family, knows the right people, can navigate social situations that John finds uncomfortable, but he shares John's vision of bringing order to the chaos of the oil industry. He is ambitious, intelligent, and willing to be ruthless when necessary. Together they make a formidable team. John handles the details, the operations, the relentless focus on efficiency. Flagler handles the relationships, the negotiations, the strategic partnerships. Together, they begin to implement a strategy that will transform not just their business, but the entire structure of American capitalism. They do not merely want to be successful refiners. They want to control the entire industry. The key is the railroads. In the 1860s, there are three major railroads shipping oil out of Cleveland: the Lakeshore, the Erie, and the New York Central. They are in fierce competition with each other, often cutting rates to win business. John and Henry realize that the railroads need large, reliable shippers, customers who can guarantee volume and regular shipments. If a refinery can promise to ship 60 carloads a day, every day, it can negotiate rates far below what smaller refineries pay. Lower shipping costs mean lower total costs. Lower total costs mean the ability to undercut competitors on price while maintaining or even increasing profit margins. John and Henry approached the railroads with a proposal: give us preferential rates and we will give you guaranteed volume. The railroads agree with little hesitation. They need reliable customers. The oil business is booming, but it is also unpredictable. Many refineries are undercapitalized and unstable. They ship heavily when business is good and disappear when it is not. The railroads want customers they can count on, who will ship consistently, who will pay their bills. John offers them exactly that. Suddenly, Rockefeller and Flagler have a decisive competitive advantage. They can sell kerosene more cheaply than anyone else in Cleveland and still make more money per gallon. Smaller refineries cannot match their prices. One by one, they begin to fail, unable to compete with a competitor who can consistently undercut them. By 1870, John's refinery is the largest in Cleveland, producing more kerosene than any other single operation in the city. But John is not content to wait for competitors to fail naturally. In 1870, he organizes his various partnerships into a single corporation, the Standard Oil Company of Ohio. The initial capitalization is $1 million, an enormous sum for the time. John owns the largest share, 27%, with Flagler, Harkness, and Andrews holding the rest. He is 31 years old and already one of the wealthiest men in Cleveland. What happens next will become known as the Cleveland Massacre, and it will define John D. Rockefeller's reputation for the rest of his life. In early 1872, Cleveland has 26 oil refineries. Standard Oil is the largest, but there are still many competitors, some of them substantial operations run by capable men. John and Henry conceive of a plan to consolidate the entire Cleveland refining industry in a matter of weeks. They create the South Improvement Company, a scheme so audacious in its dishonesty that it will shock even the cynical businessmen of the Gilded Age. The plan works like this. The South Improvement Company makes a secret agreement with the railroads. The railroads will dramatically increase their published shipping rates, making it prohibitively expensive for independent refiners to ship their product. But members of the South Improvement Company will receive rebates, bringing their actual costs below even the old rates. Even more astonishing, the railroads will pay the South Improvement Company a rebate on every barrel shipped by competitors. In other words, every time an independent refiner ships a barrel of oil, they will be subsidizing their own destruction by paying money to Standard Oil. It is a brilliant plan, ruthless in its efficiency. It will give Standard Oil an insurmountable advantage. Independent refiners will be crushed by shipping costs alone, even if they are otherwise as efficient as Standard Oil. and Standard Oil will profit from their competitors' every shipment, growing stronger as the competition grows weaker. But the scheme is exposed before it can fully be implemented. Someone leaks the details, perhaps a railroad official with a conscience, perhaps a competitor who sees the documents. The Pennsylvania legislature holds hearings, newspapers publish outraged editorials. Independent oil producers in Pennsylvania, who will be even more devastated than refiners by the plan, threaten violence. They form unions, refuse to sell crude to members of the South Improvement Company, burn railroad trestles. The public outcry is enormous. Even by the standards of the Gilded Age, when monopolistic practices are common, the South Improvement Company is seen as going too far. The Pennsylvania legislature revokes the company's charter. The railroads, facing political pressure and potential legislation, back away from the agreement. The scheme collapses before a single rebate is paid. John will later claim that the South Improvement Company never actually operated, that no rebates were ever collected. This is technically true, but the exposure of the scheme serves John's purposes perfectly. Independent refiners are now terrified. They have seen what Rockefeller is willing to do, what kind of arrangements he is capable of negotiating. They believe, correctly, that he has the power to do it, that even if this particular plan failed, he will find another way. The message is clear: Standard Oil intends to dominate, and resistance is futile. John and Henry begin visiting the other Cleveland refiners, one by one. The meetings follow a similar pattern. John arrives, quiet and methodical, accompanied by Flagler or one of his other partners. They meet in private, usually in the office of the refiner being targeted. John does not threaten explicitly. He does not need to. He comes with detailed knowledge of the competitors' finances, their debts, their weaknesses. He knows how much they owe, who their creditors are, what their profit margins look like. This knowledge, obtained through a network of informants and careful observation, is itself intimidating. It shows that Standard Oil is watching, that nothing is secret, that resistance will be identified and countered. He makes an offer: sell to Standard Oil. The price offered is usually fair, sometimes even generous. John is not trying to steal these refineries. He is trying to absorb them. He offers cash, or more often, stock in Standard Oil. Those who take stock will become partners in the consolidation, sharing in the profits as Standard Oil grows. It is, from a purely financial perspective, often a good deal. Standard Oil is well managed and profitable. Its stock will make many of these men wealthy. But the alternative is made clear: those who refuse to sell will be crushed. Standard Oil will undercut their prices, use its railroad relationships to make shipping unaffordable, and drive them into bankruptcy. Then Standard Oil will buy their assets at bankruptcy prices, paying far less than the current offer. Better to sell now on reasonable terms than to fight and lose everything. One by one, the refiners yield. Some sell willingly, seeing the inevitability of consolidation and wanting to be part of it. Others sell under duress, their owners bitter and defeated, knowing they have no real choice. Frank Rockefeller, John's younger brother, owns a small refinery he refuses to sell. John makes the same offer to him that he makes to everyone else, with the same implicit threat. Frank is furious. "You are destroying competition. You are building a monopoly." John's response is calm, almost philosophical. Cooperation is better than competition. The industry is chaotic. Consolidation will bring stability. You can be part of it, or you can be crushed by it. Choose. Frank eventually sells, but he never forgives his brother. For the rest of their lives, they will barely speak. Frank will tell anyone who will listen that John is a monster, a man without conscience, someone who would destroy his own brother for profit. But he sells, and he takes the stock, and he becomes wealthy because of it. Whether he admits it or not, John's prediction is correct. Consolidation is inevitable. Those who resist are destroyed. Those who cooperate prosper. Over the course of 6 weeks in the spring of 1872, 22 of Cleveland's 26 refineries are absorbed into Standard Oil. Some sell willingly, taking stock in Standard Oil and becoming partners in the consolidation. Others sell under duress, their owners bitter and defeated. Among them is Isaac Hewitt, John's former employer from his first job at Hewitt, and Tuttle. John visits Hewitt personally. The meeting is cordial, but John's satisfaction is barely concealed. Years ago, Hewitt refused to promote him, refused to pay him what he thought he was worth. Now, John is buying him out, absorbing his business into an empire that dwarfs anything Hewitt could have imagined. John later admits in his memoirs that he savored a feeling of sweet revenge. The boy who earned 50 cents a day is now dictating terms to the man who once employed him. The Cleveland massacre establishes a pattern that will repeat across the country over the next decade. Enter a market. Offer to buy competitors at a fair price. If they refuse, use superior capital and railroad relationships to undercut them until they fail, then buy their assets at bankruptcy prices. It is systematic, efficient, and utterly ruthless. By 1873, Standard Oil controls 25% of the nation's refining capacity. By 1875, it is 50%. By 1879, it is 90%. John does not see it as ruthless. He sees it as bringing order to chaos. The oil industry in the 1870s is wildly unstable, with boom and bust cycles that ruin speculators and create shortages and gluts. Too many small refineries are operating inefficiently, wasting oil, driving prices down through destructive competition. John believes that consolidation will stabilize the industry, eliminate waste, and ultimately benefit everyone: producers, refiners, distributors, and consumers. He calls competition a sin, and he means it. Competition, in his view, is wasteful, destructive, irrational. It produces chaos. Cooperation, which is to say, domination by a single well-managed entity, produces order. But there is another force driving him, one he never acknowledges publicly and perhaps never fully confronts even in his own mind. He is proving that he is not his father. Where Devil Bill was chaotic and unreliable, John is methodical and systematic. Where Bill made empty promises, John honors his contracts to the letter, even when the contracts are one-sided and favor him enormously. Where Bill fled from consequences, John faces them with icy calm, meeting with regulators, testifying before legislative committees, defending his practices in court. He is building an empire of control, a system so vast and well-organized that nothing can threaten it. No unexpected crisis can bring it down. He is creating the absolute security that his childhood never had. By 1879, Standard Oil controls 90% of the oil refined in the United States. It is the largest corporation in the world, and John D. Rockefeller, at age 40, is one of the richest men in America. He is worth an estimated $20 million, an almost incomprehensible fortune, at a time when a skilled worker might earn $500 a year. But the victory is incomplete. The company is still nominally divided into multiple state-chartered corporations, with different shareholders and different legal structures. Different states have different laws about corporate organization. Standard Oil of Ohio cannot legally own refineries in New York or Pennsylvania. The structure is clumsy, inefficient. John wants complete centralization, perfect control. In 1882, he and his lawyers create a new legal structure, the Standard Oil Trust. The trust is a revolutionary concept invented specifically to solve the problem of interstate corporate ownership. Shareholders of the various Standard Oil companies transfer their stock to a board of 9 trustees, who then manage the entire enterprise as a single, unified organization. The trust is worth $70 million, controls 90% of American oil refining, and operates in almost every state. It is the first great American business trust, and it will become the model for consolidation in steel, sugar, tobacco, and countless other industries. John has not just built a monopoly, he has invented a new form of economic organization. The trust allows John to do what he has always wanted, impose total order on a chaotic industry. Standard Oil's refineries are the most efficient in the world, producing more kerosene per barrel of crude than any competitor. The company controls pipelines, railroads, barrel manufacturing, and shipping. It operates its own intelligence network with agents who report on competitors' activities, market conditions, political developments. It uses its market power to demand preferential treatment from railroads and suppliers. It drives prices down for consumers. Kerosene becomes affordable for even poor families, transforming evening life for millions of people who can now afford to light their homes after dark, while driving profits up for shareholders. It is a machine of extraordinary efficiency, and John is its architect and supreme operator. But the machine has a cost, and the cost is measured in the lives of men who stood in its way. Former competitors who sold their refineries and took stock in Standard Oil do well, growing wealthy as the company expands. But those who refused to sell and tried to compete independently are destroyed. Some die in poverty, their life savings lost, their businesses bankrupted. Some commit suicide, unable to face the ruin John has brought upon them. The oil regions of Pennsylvania, where independent producers and refiners once thrived, come to hate the name Rockefeller with a passion that borders on violence. They form unions, refuse to sell crude to Standard Oil, blow up pipelines. But Standard Oil is too powerful, too well capitalized, too ruthlessly efficient. Resistance is futile. Those who fight are crushed. Those who cooperate survive. John does not lose sleep over this. He believes he is acting within the law, honoring contracts, bringing order to an inherently chaotic industry. He believes that those who failed lacked the discipline, the capital, or the vision to succeed in a competitive market. He believes, with absolute certainty, that he is building something good, something that benefits not just himself but society as a whole. Cheaper kerosene means more light, more productivity, more prosperity. The fact that his profits are enormous does not contradict this. He has earned those profits through efficiency and superior management. That he has destroyed competitors in the process is simply the cost of progress. But in 1884, as he moves his headquarters and his family from Cleveland to New York City to be closer to the financial center of the nation, cracks are beginning to show. Not in the company, Standard Oil is more powerful than ever, but in John himself. He is 45 years old and working 16-hour days. He is managing an organization of unprecedented complexity, coordinating refineries, pipelines, and distribution networks across the continent and increasingly around the world. Standard Oil is exporting kerosene to Europe, Asia, South America. The logistics are staggering. He is fighting legal battles in multiple states, where legislatures and attorney generals are beginning to challenge the legality of the trust. He is dealing with labor unrest, with angry producers, with a growing public perception that Standard Oil is a monopoly that violates the principles of free competition. He is testifying before hostile legislative committees, being questioned by prosecutors, reading editorials that call him a robber baron and a threat to democracy. And he is still hiding the truth about his father. In 1889, John's mother Eliza dies in her home in Cleveland. She is 77 years old and she has lived long enough to see her son become one of the richest men in America. She has never complained about her husband's betrayals, never acknowledged publicly the shame he brought upon the family. She has maintained her dignity to the end, attending church, reading her Bible, keeping the accounts of her modest household with the same discipline she taught her children. When John visits her in her final illness, she tells him she is proud of him. She tells him that he has honored the family name. It is one of the few times in his life that John weeps. In the obituaries that John helps prepare, she is described as a widow. This is a lie. Devil Bill is still alive at age 78, living under his assumed name, Dr. William Livingston, somewhere in the Midwest, married to his second wife, Margaret. John has supported his father financially over the years. He is too dutiful a son to abandon him entirely, but he has kept his father's existence secret from the public, even from many of his business associates. Now, with his mother dead, he creates a fiction in which she was the loyal wife of a respectable man who predeceased her. He erases his father from the family history. It is an extraordinary act of denial, one that requires constant vigilance to maintain. Every time someone asks about his parents, every time he gives an interview or writes about his childhood, he must carefully navigate around the truth, maintaining the lie that his mother was a widow, that his father died long ago, that there is no bigamist living under an assumed name with a second family. The strain is enormous. In 1891 and 1892, at age 52, John suffers a partial nervous breakdown. He experiences severe digestive problems, unable to eat most foods without pain. His stomach rebels against everything: meat, rich foods, even coffee. He loses weight, his suits hanging loose on his frame. He suffers from insomnia, lying awake at night, his mind racing through problems and scenarios, unable to shut off the calculations that have governed his life. His doctors examine him, find no physical cause, and tell him that the problem is nervous exhaustion. They prescribe rest, a change of scenery, a reduction in work. John resists. Standard Oil needs him. There are battles to fight, decisions to make, competitors to crush. How can he rest when there is so much to do? And then something even more dramatic happens. He begins to lose his hair. At first it is just thinning, a wider part, more scalp visible. He ignores it, attributing it to age. But then it accelerates. His hair falls out in clumps, clogging the drain, covering his pillow. His eyebrows disappear, leaving his face strangely naked. Even his eyelashes fall out, leaving his eyes unframed, vulnerable. The condition is called alopecia areata, and it is often triggered by extreme stress. The immune system, for reasons not fully understood, attacks the hair follicles, treating them as foreign invaders. Within a year, John D. Rockefeller is completely bald, his scalp smooth as an egg, his face strangely mask-like, without eyebrows to frame his eyes. He is devastated in a way that he has not been devastated by business setbacks or legal battles. This is his body betraying him, making visible the stress and fear he works so hard to conceal. He looks in the mirror and sees a stranger, a man whose face seems unfinished, alien. He cannot control this. He cannot calculate his way out of it. He cannot impose order on his own rebellious flesh. He begins wearing wigs. For the rest of his life he will never appear in public without one. The wigs are carefully made, expensive, as close to natural looking as the technology of the era can manage. He has several, in different styles, all maintained meticulously, but they are still wigs and everyone knows it. The richest man in America, the man who controls 90% of the nation's oil, cannot control his own body. His body has betrayed him, made visible the stress and fear he works so hard to conceal. His doctors tell him to rest, to step back from the day-to-day management of Standard Oil. They warn him that if he does not, he will die. His heart is strained, his digestion ruined. He is 52 years old and his body is breaking down from the relentless pressure he has placed on it. He resists at first. The company is his creation, his life's work, the proof that he is not his father, but eventually he has no choice. In 1897, at age 58, John D. Rockefeller effectively retires from business. He turns over operational control to a team of trusted executives, John Archbold, Henry Rogers, and others who have been with him since the early days, and devotes himself to what he calls benevolences. He has been giving money away systematically since his first paycheck at age 16, but now he approaches philanthropy the way he once approached business, systematically, scientifically, with an eye toward maximum efficiency and long-term impact. He does not give to individuals who write him begging letters, though thousands do. Every day brings sacks of mail from people asking for help, widows needing money for rent, inventors needing capital for their projects, churches needing steeples, farmers needing seed money. John ignores them all. He does not give to feel good about himself. He does not give out of sentimentality or guilt. He gives to solve problems, to create lasting institutions, to address what he sees as the root causes of human suffering rather than its symptoms. In 1889, Andrew Carnegie had published an essay called The Gospel of Wealth, arguing that the rich have a moral obligation to distribute their fortunes for the public good. Carnegie writes that a man who dies rich dies disgraced, that wealth accumulated beyond what is needed for one's family should be used for the benefit of society. John reads it and agrees with the principle, but he thinks Carnegie's approach is too haphazard. Carnegie gives away libraries like a man scattering seed, with no systematic plan, no coordination, no measurement of impact. Towns that have no books suddenly have libraries, but there is no plan for staffing them, maintaining them, ensuring they serve the community effectively. It is charity as vanity project. John wants to do better. He wants to professionalize philanthropy, to make it as efficient and well-organized as Standard Oil. In 1891, he hires a Baptist minister named Frederick T. Gates to manage his charitable giving. Gates is a remarkable man, intelligent, principled, with a gift for organization and a conviction that charity must be scientific rather than sentimental. He tells John bluntly that his fortune, if not carefully distributed, will crush the family under the weight of moral responsibility and public expectation. He warns that random giving will only attract more beggars and create dependency rather than solving problems. What John needs, Gates argues, is a systematic approach, identify root causes of suffering, create institutions to address them, endow those institutions well enough that they can sustain themselves and grow beyond the founder's lifetime. Together, John and Gates begin to revolutionize American philanthropy. In 1892, John founds the University of Chicago, pouring $35 million into it over the course of his life, more than $300 million in today's dollars. It is not a vanity project. The university does not bear his name during his lifetime, and John insists on anonymity for the early donations. He wants the institution to succeed on its merits, not on his reputation. He hires the best president he can find, William Rainey Harper, a brilliant scholar, and gives him the resources to recruit world-class faculty. Within a decade, the University of Chicago becomes one of the great research institutions in the world, producing Nobel Prize winners and advancing human knowledge across dozens of fields. In 1901, John founds the Rockefeller Institute for Medical Research, the first American institution devoted entirely to biomedical research. It will eventually become Rockefeller University, and its scientists will make breakthrough discoveries in virology, immunology, and molecular biology. The institute will help eradicate hookworm in the American South, a parasitic disease that has kept millions of poor rural people in a state of chronic exhaustion and poverty. It will develop the first effective treatments for spinal meningitis. It will lay the groundwork for modern antibiotics. It will produce 25 Nobel Prize winners over the course of a century. In 1913, John establishes the Rockefeller Foundation with an initial endowment of $100 million, more than $2 billion in today's dollars. Its mission is to promote the well-being of mankind throughout the world. The foundation will go on to fund public health initiatives that save millions of lives, support scientific research that wins Nobel Prizes, and advance education and agriculture in developing countries. It will help develop the yellow fever vaccine. It will fund the green revolution in agriculture that will prevent famines in India and Pakistan. It will support civil rights organizations and higher education for African Americans in the segregated South. John is inventing a new model of philanthropy, not charity distributed at whim, but systematic investment in institutions that can create lasting change. He is applying the same principles of efficiency and organization that made Standard Oil successful. He is thinking in terms of root causes, long-term impact, measurable outcomes, and he is giving away money at a scale never before seen in human history. By the time of his death, he will have given away more than half his fortune, over $550 million, equivalent to tens of billions today. But even as he gives, the reputation he tried so hard to build is crumbling. In 1902, a journalist named Ida Tarbell begins publishing a series of articles in McClure's magazine titled The History of the Standard Oil Company. Tarbell is not a disinterested observer. Her father was an oil producer and small refiner in Pennsylvania, one of the independent operators that Standard Oil drove out of business. She grew up watching her father struggle, watching their community devastated as Standard Oil consolidated its control. She has spent years researching, interviewing former employees and competitors, obtaining internal documents through sources inside the company, piecing together the full story of how Standard Oil achieved its monopoly. The articles are devastating. Tarbell writes with clarity and precision, documenting the secret railroad rebates, the predatory pricing, the systematic elimination of competitors. She portrays John not as a hero of industry bringing order to chaos, but as a ruthless monopolist who built his fortune by destroying others. She describes the South Improvement Company scheme in detail, making clear that while it never technically operated, it revealed the mindset and methods of Standard Oil. She chronicles the Cleveland massacre, interviewing men whose lives were ruined by John's ultimatums. She shows how Standard Oil used its market power to coerce and intimidate, how it operated its own intelligence network to spy on competitors, how it used its control of pipelines and railroads to strangle independent producers. The articles run for 2 years, published in monthly installments that are read by millions. They are meticulously researched, filled with documents and sworn testimony. They are impossible to dismiss as mere muck-raking. John's lawyers advise him to sue for libel, but John refuses. A lawsuit would only give the accusations more publicity, would allow Tarbell to present her evidence in court, where it would receive even more attention. Better to remain silent, to weather the storm, to let the articles run their course. But the most shocking revelation comes in 1905, when Tarbell publishes information about John's father. She has tracked down Devil Bill, still alive at age 95, still living under the name Dr. William Livingston in Freeport, Illinois. She has found his second wife, Margaret, interviewed neighbors who know him as Dr. Livingston, confirmed that he is indeed the same William Avery Rockefeller who abandoned his first family decades ago. She reveals his bigamy, his history as a conman, and accused rapist, the fact that he abandoned his family and created a second identity. She publishes the story that John has spent his entire adult life trying to hide. The exposure is a catastrophe. John has built his entire public identity around being a respectable Baptist businessman, a man of principle and order. He has spent 50 years constructing a facade of respectability, giving to charity, attending church, maintaining the image of a man whose success came from hard work and moral character. Now the world knows that he is the son of a con man and bigamist, that he has been lying about his father for decades, that the man whose name is synonymous with American capitalism comes from a background of fraud and disgrace. John's response is telling. He refuses to speak publicly about Tarbell or her articles. When advisors urge him to respond, to defend himself, to explain the context, he refuses. He calls her Miss Tarbarrel in private, a childish insult that reveals his impotent rage. He instructs his staff never to mention her name in his presence, but he cannot stop the damage. Tarbell's articles are read by millions. They are compiled into a book that becomes a bestseller. They crystallize a growing public anger at the monopolies and trusts that seem to control every aspect of American economic life. John D. Rockefeller becomes the symbol of everything that is wrong with Gilded Age capitalism, the robber baron, the trust builder, the man who built a fortune on the ruins of other men's lives. The exposure affects his son even more severely. John D. Rockefeller Jr., who has been groomed to take over the family's philanthropic work, suffers what his biographers describe as a catastrophic nervous breakdown. He is 28 years old, newly married, trying to prove himself worthy of his father's expectations. The revelations about his grandfather, combined with the relentless attacks on his father, nearly destroy him. He is hospitalized for weeks, unable to eat or sleep, tormented by the weight of the family name. He has spent his life trying to live up to his father's standards, trying to be worthy of the Rockefeller name. Now that name is synonymous with greed and corruption, with ruthlessness and dishonesty. How can he defend it? How can he redeem it? For John Jr., the collapse is total. He emerges from the breakdown changed, quieter, even more serious than before. He will eventually recover and devote his life to rehabilitating the Rockefeller reputation through even more ambitious philanthropy, building Rockefeller Center, restoring colonial Williamsburg, donating the land for the United Nations headquarters in New York. He will give away more money than his father did, always with the explicit goal of proving that Rockefeller can mean something other than robber baron. But the wound never fully heals. He will always carry the burden of the name, the need to prove that he is different, that his grandfather's crimes and his father's ruthlessness do not define what he will become. As for John Sr., the attacks continue. In 1906, Devil Bill dies at age 95 in Freeport, Illinois, still living under his assumed name, Dr. William Livingston, his bigamous marriage intact to the end. He is buried in an unmarked grave, identified only as William Livingston. John attends the funeral quietly, without public acknowledgement. There are no obituaries in the major papers. The death of William Avery Rockefeller goes unremarked. Even in death, his father is a secret to be managed, a shame to be concealed. In 1911, the Supreme Court rules that Standard Oil is an illegal monopoly under the Sherman Antitrust Act and orders it broken into 34 separate companies. The decision is the culmination of years of legal battles, investigations by state and federal authorities, testimony before hostile congressional committees. The government argues that Standard Oil has used its market power to destroy competition, that it has violated the principles of free enterprise that are supposed to govern American capitalism. John testifies, defending his practices, arguing that consolidation benefited consumers by lowering prices and improving quality. But the court is unconvinced. Standard Oil must be dissolved. It is supposed to be John's defeat, the final repudiation of everything he built, but it has the opposite effect. As the largest shareholder in Standard Oil, he owns about 27% of the stock, John receives equivalent shares in all 34 successor companies. The breakup unleashes the value that was locked up in the unified trust. The individual companies, which will eventually become ExxonMobil, Chevron, ConocoPhillips and others, thrive as independent entities, their stock price is soaring. By 1913, John's personal wealth peaks at approximately $900 million, equivalent to roughly 3% of the entire American economy at the time. Adjusted for inflation and economic growth, it is the equivalent of nearly $300 billion today, making him one of the richest human beings who has ever lived. He is the first American billionaire. The money means nothing to him at this point in his life. He has long since stopped caring about accumulation for its own sake. He lives modestly by the standards of the super-rich. His house at Pocantico Hills is large but not ostentatious. He eats simple food, milk, bread, vegetables. He avoids rich foods that upset his sensitive digestion. He wears inexpensive suits, repairing them when they wear out rather than buying new ones. He plays golf obsessively, not for the social aspect. He does not enjoy socializing, but because his doctors tell him the exercise is good for him. He hands out shiny new dimes to children he meets on the street, a gesture that becomes famous. Some see it as generosity, others see it as condescension, the billionaire scattering pocket change like a king distributing alms. He spends winters in Florida and summers at his estate in Pocantico Hills, New York. He is methodical about his health, following his doctor's instructions precisely. Determined to live as long as possible, he wants to reach 100 years old. It becomes an obsession, a final challenge to master. He tracks his diet, his exercise, his sleep. He avoids stress, delegates all business decisions to others. He has given away control of Standard Oil, of the philanthropic foundations, of everything. He is focused on one goal: survival. But the past will not let him go. In 1914, a disaster occurs that brings all the old accusations roaring back. At Ludlow, Colorado, miners working for the Colorado Fuel and Iron Company, a company John owns a controlling interest in, go on strike for better wages and working conditions. They are living in company towns, paying rent to the company, buying food from company stores at inflated prices. They are essentially trapped in a system of debt peonage, working to pay off debts that never seem to decrease. They strike, demanding better pay, safer conditions, recognition of their union. The company refuses to negotiate. The miners and their families are evicted from company housing and set up a tent colony nearby, determined to wait out the company. The strike drags on for months. Tensions rise. There are incidents, shots fired, property damaged. The Colorado governor calls in the National Guard, ostensibly to keep the peace, but the Guard sides with the company, harassing the strikers, intimidating their families. On April 20th, 1914, the Guard attacks the tent colony. The details are disputed, but the outcome is not. A battle erupts. Machine guns are fired into the camp. A fire breaks out, consuming the tents. When the smoke clears, 21 people are dead, including 11 children and 2 women who suffocated in a pit beneath a burning tent where they had taken refuge. The Ludlow Massacre, as it becomes known, is national news. Photographs of the burned tent colony, of grieving families, of the bodies of children are published in newspapers across the country. John is blamed, though he had no direct involvement in the management decisions that led to the violence. He has never visited the Colorado mines. He has never met the managers who ordered the evictions or called in the National Guard. He owns stock in the company, but he does not run it. Yet he is held responsible because he is the largest shareholder, because his name is on the company, because he represents the system that led to Ludlow. Protests erupt across the country. Anarchists plot to bomb the Rockefeller family homes. One bomb goes off at the Tarrytown estate, exploding in the early morning hours, damaging the building but injuring no one. Another anarchist, preparing a bomb in his New York apartment, is blown up by his own device. The family is placed under guard. John is advised not to leave his estate without protection. For John, it is a nightmare he cannot wake from. He has spent the last 17 years trying to remake his reputation through philanthropy, trying to prove that he is more than a robber baron, that his wealth can be used for good. And now he is being held responsible for the deaths of children. The irony is bitter. He has given away hundreds of millions of dollars to save lives through medical research and public health initiatives, hookworm eradication, yellow fever vaccines, maternal health programs, and he is being vilified for deaths that occurred at a company he owns but does not manage. His response is characteristic. He hires Ivy Lee, one of the first public relations experts in America, to manage his image. Lee advises him to become more visible, to humanize himself, to show the public that he is not the heartless monster of Tarbell's articles. John begins making carefully staged public appearances, handing out dimes to children, playing golf with celebrities, allowing himself to be photographed looking grandfatherly and benign. He refuses to engage with his critics directly. He has learned that responding only gives them more ammunition, but he works tirelessly to shift the narrative from robber baron to benevolent philanthropist. It works slowly. By the 1920s, as the progressive era fades and the country enters the boom years before the Great Depression, John's reputation begins to improve. The breakup of Standard Oil is old news. Tarbell's exposés are history, her magazine articles overtaken by newer scandals and controversies. What remains visible is the philanthropy, the University of Chicago producing world-class scholars, the Rockefeller Institute making medical breakthroughs, the Rockefeller Foundation funding public health campaigns that eradicate diseases in the American South and around the world. He is becoming, in his old age, the benevolent patriarch, the wise philanthropist who built something good from his fortune. In 1915, his wife Seti dies after a long illness. They have been married for 51 years. She has been his partner, his advisor, his moral compass. She has raised their children, managed the household, advised him on philanthropic strategies. She has been the steady presence that allowed him to focus on his obsessions, first business and then charity. He is bereft in a way that surprises those who see him as cold and calculating. He does not weep publicly, he never does, but those close to him see the change. He becomes quieter, more withdrawn. He visits her grave often, standing silently beside it, his face unreadable. He marks her grave with a simple stone, in keeping with the modest Baptist values they shared. He continues his routines, the golf, the carefully regulated diet, the philanthropic meetings with Gates and the foundation staff. But something essential is gone. For 51 years, Seti was the person he could talk to honestly, the one person who knew him fully and loved him anyway. Without her, he is more alone than he has ever been. He lives on, year after year, his body preserved by wealth and careful management. By the 1920s, he is a curiosity, the oldest man anyone knows, a relic of the 19th century, still alive in the age of automobiles and radio and airplanes. He has outlived almost all his enemies and most of his friends. Devil Bill is long dead. Ida Tarbell is an old woman, retired from journalism, her crusade against Standard Oil a chapter in history books. The men who built Standard Oil with him, Flagler, Rogers, Archbold, are all gone. Even Theodore Roosevelt, who crusaded against the trusts and made the breakup of Standard Oil a personal mission, is dead. John is alone with his legacy, and the legacy is complicated beyond measure. He has given away more than $500 million, creating institutions that will benefit humanity for generations. The University of Chicago is one of the premier research institutions in the world. Rockefeller University has produced Nobel Prize winners whose discoveries have saved millions of lives. The Rockefeller Foundation has funded programs that eradicated diseases, improved agriculture, advanced education in developing countries. By any measure, his philanthropy has created enormous good, but he built that fortune through tactics that destroyed lives and violated the principles of fair competition. He crushed competitors without mercy, drove men to ruin and suicide, created a monopoly that controlled an entire industry. He was willing to use any legal means to achieve his ends, and when legal means were not enough, he pushed the boundaries of legality until regulators and courts were forced to intervene. He has been a devoted Baptist who tithed religiously from his first paycheck. But he hid his father's disgrace with lies that corroded his soul and devastated his son. He has been a man of absolute self-control and discipline, but his body betrayed him, stripping away his hair, manifesting the stress and fear he would never acknowledge. The fundamental question, the question that historians still debate, that biographers still puzzle over, is whether the philanthropy was atonement or conviction. Did John give away his fortune because he felt guilty about how he acquired it, or because his Baptist faith genuinely compelled him to see wealth as a stewardship rather than a possession? The evidence is contradictory and complex. He tithed from age 16, long before he had anything to feel guilty about, long before Standard Oil existed or the Cleveland Massacre occurred. He spoke often of the religious duty of the rich to help the poor, and he seemed to believe it sincerely with the same intensity he brought to every other conviction. Some historians argue that the idea of guilt-driven philanthropy is a romantic invention, that there is no evidence John ever worried about the morality of his business tactics, that he saw himself as bringing order to chaos and was genuinely convinced he had done good in the world. But there is the matter of the secret. The hidden father, the lies about his mother being a widow, the nervous breakdown that stripped him of his hair, the way his son crumbled under the weight of the family name. These are not the marks of a man at peace with himself. These are the signs of a deep, unacknowledged wound, of a shame that was never healed, of a past that could never be fully escaped. Perhaps the truth is more complex than either guilt or innocence, more nuanced than simple cause and effect. Perhaps John spent his life trying to build something his father never could, something legitimate, permanent, respectable. And the ruthlessness he employed was not cruelty but desperation, the determination of a man who had seen chaos up close and would do anything to prevent it from touching him again. Perhaps the philanthropy was both genuine religious conviction and an unconscious attempt to balance the scales, to create good that could justify the harm, to build institutions so beneficial that they would outweigh the destroyed lives and broken competitors. What is certain is that he never escaped his father. Devil Bill's ghost haunted him even after the old con man was dead and buried in an unmarked grave. The need to prove he was different, the obsessive control, the secrecy, the fear of exposure, all of it traced back to that farm in Richford, to the boy who learned that his father was not what he appeared to be, that the world was unstable and dangerous, that security was an illusion that could be shattered at any moment by scandal or betrayal. In his final years, John returns often to Florida, to the Casements, the estate he bought in Ormond Beach in 1918. It is a beautiful place, a mansion overlooking the Atlantic, surrounded by palm trees and tropical gardens. He plays golf with increasing difficulty as his body weakens, his drives growing shorter, his walks slower. He hands out dimes to local children who wait for him after his rounds, knowing that the strange old man with the wig will give them each a shiny coin. Some see it as generous, others see it as sad, a billionaire reduced to these small gestures of connection. He writes poetry, filling notebooks with verses that are sincere but not particularly good. He reflects on his life, his achievements, his losses. At age 86, he writes a poem that reveals his self-image, the story he has told himself about who he is and what his life meant. I was early taught to work as well as play. My life has been one long, happy holiday, full of work and full of play. I dropped the worry on the way, and God was good to me every day. It is a remarkable piece of self-mythology. The claim that he dropped the worry on the way is almost laughably false for a man who suffered a nervous breakdown and lost all his hair from stress, who spent his life haunted by his father's shame, who built an empire of control because he was terrified of chaos. But perhaps by the time he writes it, he believes it. Perhaps he has convinced himself that his life was indeed one long, happy holiday, that the ruthlessness was necessary and justified, that the philanthropy balanced the ledger, that he built something good that will outlast all the criticism and controversy. On May 23, 1937, John wakes at dawn in his wheelchair on the veranda at the casements. The ocean is calm, barely moving, the waves gentle whispers against the sand. The air is warm and heavy with the scent of flowers. He has lived 97 years and 6 months. He has been the richest man in America for most of that time. He has built an empire and given away a fortune. He has saved millions of lives through his philanthropy and destroyed thousands through his business practices. He has been loved and hated in equal measure, celebrated and vilified, praised as a genius and condemned as a monster. His valet, who has been with him for years, stands nearby, waiting as he always waits in the early morning, ready to help the old man inside when he is ready for breakfast. John's lips move. They form words, barely audible, perhaps just a name, perhaps a prayer, perhaps nothing coherent at all. The valet leans closer, trying to make sense of the sound, but before he can decipher it, consciousness leaves the old man like water, draining from a basin, smooth and inevitable and final. By the time the sun fully rises, painting the sky in shades of coral and gold, John Davison Rockefeller is dead. The news of his death spreads quickly across the telegraph wires and radio waves. The New York Times publishes a long obituary that struggles to summarize a life so vast and contradictory. The richest American, the man who built an empire that controlled 90% of the nation's oil, the philanthropist who gave away more than $500 million, the man whose name became synonymous with both ruthless capitalism and systematic charity. The obituary mentions the University of Chicago, the Rockefeller Institute, the Rockefeller Foundation. It mentions the breakup of Standard Oil. It mentions, briefly and delicately, the controversies and accusations that dogged him throughout his life. It concludes that he was one of the most remarkable men of his era. A statement that is true, but inadequate to capture the complexity and contradiction of his legacy. The funeral is private, held in Cleveland at the Euclid Avenue Baptist Church, where he once taught Sunday school as a young man just starting out in business. The church is packed with family, friends, business associates, foundation staff. There are no grand eulogies. The service is simple in keeping with Baptist tradition and John's own preferences. He is buried at Lakeview Cemetery next to his wife Settie, beneath a modest stone that gives no hint of his wealth or accomplishments. The stone reads simply, John D. Rockefeller, 1839 and 1937. No titles, no honors, no epitaph, just his name and the years he lived. His estate is appraised at just $26 million, a fraction of what he once owned, the rest given away or held in foundations and trusts. Even in death, he has maintained the discipline of systematic giving, ensuring that the wealth he accumulated will continue to benefit humanity long after he is gone. The Standard Oil companies he created continue to dominate the global oil industry for decades. ExxonMobil and Chevron, the two largest descendants of Standard Oil, are among the most profitable corporations in the world more than a century after he founded the original company. The industry he helped create, the refining and distribution of petroleum products, becomes the foundation of the 20th century economy, powering the automobiles and airplanes and factories that define modern life. He could not have imagined the scale of it, the way oil would come to dominate geopolitics and economics, the way his methods of vertical integration and cost control would become the standard model for corporate organization across every industry. The Rockefeller Foundation continues its work, having given away billions of dollars over the course of a century. The University of Chicago remains one of the premier research institutions in the world, producing dozens of Nobel laureates and shaping fields from economics to physics to literature. Rockefeller University has produced 25 Nobel Prize winners, their discoveries ranging from blood types to DNA structure to the mechanisms of cellular metabolism. But what does his life mean? What does it tell us about the possibilities and costs of the American dream, about the relationship between wealth and morality, about the price of running from your origins? John D. Rockefeller's life is a story about control, about a boy who grew up in chaos, a con man, father, a scandalized family, constant financial instability, the ever-present threat of exposure and shame, and who decided that the only way to survive was to master everything, to leave nothing to chance, to build a system so vast and well-organized that nothing could threaten it. He succeeded beyond what anyone could have imagined. He controlled 90% of American oil. He became the richest man in the world. He created institutions that outlived him by generations and will likely outlive our civilization. But he could not control his father. He could not control the secret of his origins, could not prevent Ida Tarbell from discovering and publishing the truth he had hidden for 50 years. He could not control his own body when it betrayed him and stripped away his hair, making visible the stress he tried so hard to conceal. He could not control his son's mental collapse under the weight of the family name, and he could not control history's judgment, which remains divided to this day about whether he was a visionary who brought order to an industry or a monster who built a fortune on the ruins of other men's lives. The secret guilt of the title was not just the guilt of business tactics that destroyed competitors. It was the deeper, more primal guilt of origins. John spent his life trying to prove he was not his father, trying to build a respectable name from a foundation of shame and fraud. He succeeded in accumulating wealth and creating institutions that did genuine good. He saved millions of lives through the medical research and public health programs his fortune funded. He advanced human knowledge through the universities he endowed. He created a model of systematic philanthropy that others still follow. But he never escaped the shadow of Devil Bill, the con man and bigamist whose blood ran in his veins, whose dishonesty he had seen up close as a child, whose crimes he spent a lifetime trying to erase through respectability and wealth and systematic charity. The wound remained, hidden beneath wigs and wealth and carefully constructed facades, but never healed. In the end, John D. Rockefeller's life demonstrates both the promise and the limitation of the American belief that you can remake yourself through work and will. He did remake himself. The son of a bigamist became the richest man in America. The boy from a scandal-ridden family became the founder of great universities and medical institutes. But the remaking was never complete. The wound remained, hidden beneath wigs and wealth and carefully constructed respectability, manifesting in nervous breakdowns and alopecia and the devastating collapse of his son under the weight of expectations and shame. He wanted to live to be 100, to prove that his disciplined life and careful health management could defeat even death to achieve one final measure of control over the uncontrollable. He came close, 97 years, 6 weeks short of 98. But in the end, his heart gave out, hardened by arteriosclerosis, the muscles that had pumped blood through his body for nearly a century, finally unable to continue. It is fitting, perhaps. The man who spent his life trying to control everything died of a hardening of the heart, a physical manifestation of the emotional calcification that both enabled his success and limited his humanity. He was not cruel in the conventional sense. He did not take pleasure in others' suffering, but he was willing to accept that suffering as a necessary cost of progress, of efficiency, of order, and he was willing to live with secrets that ate at him from within, to maintain a facade of respectability that required constant vigilance and lies, to pass on to his son a burden so heavy it nearly destroyed him. The world he left behind was shaped by his vision in ways both good and terrible. The oil industry he built became the foundation of the 20th century economy, powering cars and planes and the entire machinery of modern life. But it also concentrated wealth and power in ways that violated democratic principles, that showed how capitalism without restraint could create monopolies that crushed competition and distorted markets, that gave single individuals more wealth and influence than many nations possess. The philanthropic model he pioneered, systematic, scientific, focused on root causes rather than symptoms, became the template for how the super-rich give away their fortunes. The Gates Foundation, the Buffett Foundation, the Chan Zuckerberg Initiative, and countless others follow the path he blazed, employing professional staff, measuring outcomes, thinking in terms of decades and centuries rather than immediate needs. But his example also raises uncomfortable questions. Should individuals have so much wealth that their personal decisions about where to give it can reshape entire fields of human endeavor? Is private philanthropy a solution to social problems, or a symptom of a system that allows such vast inequality in the first place? When a single family can endow universities, eradicate diseases, and shape public health policy across continents, have we created a system that is compatible with democracy? These questions remain unresolved. John D. Rockefeller did not answer them, and perhaps could not. He was a man of his time, shaped by the particular circumstances of Gilded Age America, by the explosion of industrial capitalism that created opportunities for accumulation on an unprecedented scale, by the absence of antitrust law and regulatory structures that would later constrain corporate power. He operated within the rules as they existed, or at least as he interpreted them. That he pushed those rules to their breaking point, that he found legal ways to do things that were morally questionable, does not make him unusual among the titans of his era. It makes him typical. Carnegie, Morgan, Vanderbilt, Duke, all of them used similar tactics, built similar monopolies, accumulated similar fortunes. What makes him extraordinary is the scale. No one else built a monopoly so complete or so enduring. No one else gave away so much money so systematically. No one else lived so long or left such a complex legacy. And no one else carried such a burden of secret shame. The hidden father whose disgrace shaped every choice and every achievement, who turned a boy into a man obsessed with control and respectability, who could never be escaped no matter how much wealth was accumulated or how many universities were endowed. In the end, we return to that morning in Florida, to the old man in his wheelchair on the veranda, the ocean murmuring beyond the palms. He has outlived everyone who knew the full truth of his origins, his father, his mother, his wife, most of his enemies. He has built institutions that will last centuries. He has given away a fortune that would have been unimaginable to the boy who earned 50 cents a day at his first job. He has lived 97 years, long enough to see his reputation begin to recover, long enough to become a grandfather figure rather than a robber baron in the public imagination. And he is still wearing a wig, still maintaining the facade, still hiding the wound that never healed. What did he whisper to his valet in that final moment of consciousness? We will never know. Perhaps it was something mundane, a request for water, an observation about the weather, a comment about breakfast. Perhaps it was something profound, a final acknowledgement of truths long suppressed, a name he had not spoken aloud in decades, a prayer for forgiveness or understanding. Or perhaps he said nothing important at all, just the random words of a mind letting go, releasing its grip on control at last. What we know is this: John Davison Rockefeller died as he had lived, in control to the very end, his secrets intact, his legacy both magnificent and troubling. He proved that the son of a con man could become the richest man in the world. He proved that wealth could be given away as systematically as it was accumulated. He proved that discipline and calculation and ruthless efficiency could build an empire that would reshape the world. But he could not prove that he was not his father. That wound was too deep, the shame too foundational. Devil Bill's ghost haunted him to the end, shaping him more profoundly than any business decision or philanthropic gift. He built towers of wealth and charity on that foundation of shame, and they stand to this day, the universities, the research institutes, the foundations that bear his name and carry on his vision of systematic giving. But the foundation remains, hidden beneath everything he accomplished, the secret guilt that drove him and shaped him and ultimately defined him more than all the oil fields and universities and foundations in the world. This is the story of John D. Rockefeller, the boy who ran from his father's disgrace and spent his life trying to build something so respectable, so permanent, so good, that it would erase the stain of his origins. He succeeded in creating institutions that changed the world, but he never escaped the shadow. And in that failure, that very human, very understandable failure to transcend the wounds of childhood, to escape the shame of origins, to control the uncontrollable, he remains profoundly, tragically human. Not the monster of Tarbell's exposés, not the saint of his own self-mythology, but a man caught between the chaos he came from and the order he tried to impose, between the shame he inherited and the respectability he built, between the father he could never escape and the legacy he hoped would outlast the scandal. In the end, both remain. The universities still teach, the foundations still give, the oil companies still dominate, and somewhere in the archives there are still records of Devil Bill, the con man and bigamist whose son became the richest man in America and spent a lifetime running from the truth.